encourage you all to keep an open mind about what I talk about. I think any piece of writing is best understood in its completeness, and this one might tread on some comfort zones. I say keep an open mind for another reason too. I'm going to talk about AI in this piece. You can't talk about the future without it. And it is like a conversational landmine. You drop those two letters and suddenly everyone has to have an opinion. It feels like there is no neutrality. If you use it, you're terrible, and if you don't, you're scared, or whatever. I want us to forget all of that too. Let me also say, I'm not here to convince you to think one way or another about AI. In fact, I want to get it off the table early that this sermon isn't about AI. It's a really small part of it. It's just a means to make a point. There are happier things to talk about, I promise. But I have got a little exercise here that I would like you all to do if you're willing. I've got two essays here. Each one are roughly 500 words, and each one are about the cultural significance of the 2026 World Cup. I'd like each of you to give both these essays a very quick skim, and when most everyone has read both, I'm going to ask you which essay you think is real and which one you think ChatGPT wrote. Sound fun?
Yeah.
Cool. I'll start these around. While that happens, I'm going to start by talking about Peace Camp. I worked at this place called Peace Camp last summer. It is a typical summer camp, but it is themed around community and understanding and peace. They'll have field trips, outdoor time, and art projects and songs and such, but they'll also have like people of different religions and cultural practices come in, and then like the kids would have discussions about the differences between those practices and their own. It's like the most UU thing ever. And later in those sessions, the wonderful Jen Enriquez, who runs the program, would give this multimedia lecture from her series, The Stories in the Sand. She'd have like a bag of sand, and she'd put little figures and things in it. And in The Stories in the Sand, she talks about this thing called the lie, which is that some humans are created better than others. The lie is racism. The lie is prejudice. A lie enforced from the colonization of Christopher Columbus to the oppression still experienced today across the country. They're good stories. Over 200 people around the world are trained to tell them. The thing about Peace Camp is, at first, to be honest, I didn't believe in it. I went to Peace Camp myself when I was a kid, and coming into the counselor position, I didn't remember any of it at all. I don't remember the stories in the sand or what the Jewish and Muslim ambassadors had told us about their religions. Like, the things I could remember were like the field trip and coloring. And it just didn't add up to me. Like, how could just teaching kids that peace is a good thing have like any effect at all when there are so many external forces acting on these children that are against peace? And these kids just did not care at all. We did this one game of questions, and I asked one 10-year-old kid what he would do with $100, and he said, buy a bomb to put under my brother's bed. I had come into this already decided that no amount of singing and holding hands and kumbayas would have any lasting effect. I mean, it's kind of like telling people that to save the planet, all they need to do is recycle. So much recycling just ends up in landfills anyway, and that pollution is like nothing at all compared to oil and gas and coal. I thought these kids, they'd just grow up and forget. I did. In my sophomore year of college, I go on to write this nonfiction piece called Peace Camp, a Retrospective. in which I interrogate my disbelief. I interviewed Jen for this piece, and I told her that when I came to Peace Camp, I didn't believe it would work, and she seemed shocked. And I asked her in what ways she'd seen her program have a lasting effect. And she told me about this time where one of the former campers, while downtown with their family, passed by a person experiencing homelessness and turned to their mother and asked, "Mom, does that have something to do with the lie?" And I thought, oh, a kid can put that together. By the end of Peace Camp, my session, that same kid who made the bomb joke not only of his own accord confessed to be the delinquent tossing things out of the bus window at cars, but also agreed to write an apology to the bus company. This other kid, in another session that I also did, this little 5-year-old, absolute catalyst of energy, who would never sit still, who would always interrupt, who would always give me like the stink eye whenever he walked in the door. I had to pull him aside multiple times to talk about his behavior, and he hated it. And this kid sat and listened for the final stories in the sand. And he shared the genuine emotions he'd felt during his last day in our circle. And at the end of the session, before leaving, he ran up to me and gave me a huge hug. I think I was the only one he did that to. It was adorable. All right, I've seen that the essays have made their way a good bit around.
I couldn't listen to and read the essay at the same time, so I just didn't read the essay.
Okay.
Talk about later too.
I'm a very good reader, and I could have chose to read the essay, but I wanted to hear you.
Sure, that's okay. I'm seeing a couple people have seen the essays, though, so if we could just get, like, a quick poll. Everyone who thinks essay A is AI, can we get a hand raise? Anyone who thinks it's essay B? Couple people for B. Anyone thinks it was neither of them? Interesting. All right. Well, those can absolutely keep making their way around.
Tell us next week.
Huh? Tell us next week? Yeah, sure. No. I'm gonna spoil the surprise. Both those essays are AI. Different prompts in ChatGPT. Raise your hand if you thought that could have been the case. Boom, boom, boom. We got some winners. You guys win. You get all the points. You're today's winners. Congratulations. Sorry for tricking y'all. So what is missing? Why couldn't a human have written those essays? What stories were left out from the cultural significance of the 2026 World Cup? There's the story of Lumumba Veya, Lumumba Lives. Michel Kuka Mbaladinga, a man from the Democratic Republic of the Congo who would become a living statue at the games Congo played. He represents the first prime minister the country had after gaining independence from Belgium, who was later assassinated by Belgian authorities. There's the story of the Norwegian national team who donated their ticket sales from their qualifier game against Israel to humanitarian aid in Gaza. There's the story of Donald Trump, who planted himself in the middle of the winner's photo and the Spanish national team who wouldn't pose or raise the cup until he left. There's the story of Homer's Iliad. Bear with me for a second. Which we read in the humanities sequence at my college. The Greek oral tradition folk tale about the Trojan War. Achilles, the strongest fighter of the Greeks, refuses to go to war over a petty squabble with Agamemnon about treasure, which at the time was women. Because Achilles will not fight, his best friend Patroclus, who goes in his place, is slayed along with countless other Greeks. At the end of the story, a funeral is held for Patroclus and the Prince of Troy. At this funeral, they have games, one of which is a chariot race with a mare as one of the prizes. Diomedes comes in first, Antilochus in second, and Menelaus in third. And Antilochus and Menelaus get into it. Menelaus accuses Antilochus of cheating, forcing him to swear that he didn't if he wants to claim the mare as the prize. And Antilochus says, I will do no such thing, but Jesus, dude, if it matters that much to you, just have the mare. Makes no difference to me. And Menelaus thinks about this and goes, oh, I'm sorry, man. I was out of line. That was a stupid fight over what was literally just some treasure. You have the mare. It is almost beat for beat what happens with Achilles and Agamemnon, except everyone works it out this time. No one's at war. No one's dying. They're playing sports. The Iliad is an incredibly violent story, and yet this part reminds us it doesn't have to be this way. That sports prove there is a such thing as a peaceful test of strength, and that maybe one day war itself can be a thing of the past. When writing these essays, AI didn't prioritize these stories. One could say it looked at the big picture and it went an inch deep. It's also not wrong. I wouldn't be right if I wrote something with those 4 stories in the spotlight, but the reason I'd include those is because I care. I've been made to care in some ways because I know AI would never scrape those stories up. In other ways, because these are stories that just feel deep to me. Everyone knows soccer brings people together, but not everyone knows about these specific things, and I care about those things, so if I were to write, I'd write about them. At Mizzou, I work at the Writing Center. I tutor students there, and I encourage them to get better at writing, and I do my best to give them the tools to do so. I've met quite a few students who use AI. They use them for things like personal essays and research reviews. There's only one of those students that I've worked with on multiple occasions and who has told me why, and it is because he doesn't believe he's a good enough writer and that it wouldn't be worth not using it. It's a little heartbreaking. And like this experiment we just did, they won't tell you that what they wrote was with AI. They'll just kind of hope it'll slip by. But especially for those personal ones, the personal essays, the ones that are supposed to represent you, they'll always come out flat, or they'll just lie. Either way, it's not a full story of someone's life. Now, I partially blame AI for this. At the end of the prompt I gave for essay B, ChatGPT says, if this is for an English class, I can also make it sound more like a high-scoring AP or college freshman essay by strengthening the analysis of each example and making the thesis more sophisticated. But there's more to it than that. That 2T never fully changed, the one who told me why, the one who I worked with on multiple occasions. But every single week he came back, I would have him ditch his AI draft and write something, anything about anything himself. And he liked it when he did it himself. He cared more about what he cared about than about sounding clean. For once, those stories were his own. By trade, I'm a journalist. I'll never not relish the feeling of getting someone to talk about something they really, really care about. And what I've learned is there are a lot of stories out there. A lot of good ones, a lot of lies. I'm going to tell you definitively that no story will ever be unbiased. And that's not because every writer has their own personal biases, experience, what makes them decide what information matters and what doesn't, even though that's true. No story will ever be unbiased because those stories will all come through your eyes, and they will all be processed by your mind. And they'll strengthen some principles, and they'll break down others. I told you a lot of stories today. There's the story of Peace Camp, which made me change my mind about hope for peace in the future. There's the story of the Iliad, which tells us the questions we face today are as old as time. There's the story of the World Cup, which even for a short time gives everyone their own reasons to care about something and tugs at our heartstrings for what makes us care. There's the story of artificial intelligence's writing, which reminds us that no robot will analyze anything in the same way that a concerned human will. There's the story of disillusioned students whose disbelief in their own ability can be changed. All it takes is a story. There are some people who will never be convinced, who are set in their ways so hard no amount of stories from you will change their mind. Ask them theirs. Ask them hard questions. I'm serious about this. They may not answer, but I know they'll think. Challenge them as hard as they challenge you. That's the opportunity. And I know for certain that there are people close to you who care about you, who will be swayed, who want your stories. And they have them for you too. That's the opportunity. Be curious and care. Thank you.
What do y'all think? Do you want to hear more from our youth in the future? Yes, ma'am.